Watch together, cheer together, celebrate together, even if you're not actually together. Cox Communications, proud partner of LSU Athletics. All right, welcome to a long overdue edition of HeyFightinPodcast with Jacob Hester. We got the video crew rolling here at the Guarantee Studios. Thanks for hosting me. Thanks to your team, Paul and Danny, for producing. Thank you for joining me as well.
Yeah, we're doing an NFL, LSU,
1-0.
draft, spring football conversation, and I've got my Duncan Tiger stuff on, so I didn't come
it's sick
dressed
gear. It is sick gear.
appropriately, but Kim Mulkey's got everybody fired up.
Speaking of Kim Mulkey, I showed up at not the press conference. I showed up at the airport to welcome her.
You were suited and booted.
I was suited and booted. That is a custom suit from Indochino. So let's not get carried away here. For my brother's wedding, first custom tailored suit I'd ever bought. I'd only ever bought like off the rack. Just not a suit guy. Never wear suits.
Right.
And I like that suit. I'm a fan of that suit. I think I might have to buy another one. This podcast is not sponsored by Indochino. However, if they want to get in the game, that's all I'm saying. But I showed up in the suit, forgot my lapel pin. I wanted to rock the LSU lapel pin. And so I was like, I just kind of said to myself out loud, oh, man, I left my lapel pin. And Matt Tornquist said, I got you. And so he reached into his bag and he said, oh, man, the only one I have is the CFP one, which is a really nice lapel pin, but it's not really on brand. So I showed up with it anyway, and Stephanie Remp saw me and was like, I think we got to swap out that lapel pin. So they had some extras, got the LSU one. Long story short, got a new lapel pin. So sometimes it pays to dress off-brand.
Yeah, you dress for success, but sometimes when you go outside the lines, it pays off because now you got more than when you came into it.
Yes.
And if you didn't have the lapel pin on, did it really happen?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, I'm not a big suit guy, so obviously, henceforth, not a big lapel pin guy. But now that I am dipping my toes into the suit game, I need to up my lapel pin game as well. So I'm excited to add to the collection.
One of the best things that came from the national championship after the game, I saw someone who works for the SEC office on the field. I said, wow, that's a great lapel pin because it was an SEC one. Takes it off, gives it to me. And I was like, after the win, like that was the second most thing I was fired up for.
Nice.
So I get it.
Dunking Tiger lapel pin. I'm going to write that one down and let's call Eric after and put that in his ear. That would be sick. Okay, so I want to do a few things. This is an NFL draft preview podcast. Thanks to our friends at Cox Sports Television and Cox. They're bringing you this podcast today, so thank you to them. I have a read. I don't have the read in front of me, so what we're going to do is we're going to go back and we're going to do the read at the beginning, and we'll pop that in earlier. But before we talk I just gave away the gambit there. Before we talk NFL draft, I want to talk spring football because we haven't talked spring football on this podcast except for with assistant coaches, and it was more broad in general, and it was really before spring. So spring football has come and gone. We saw a spring game. We saw a lot of new faces. We saw an entirely new defense under a new defensive coordinator, although I wouldn't say entirely new, but certainly had some different looks to it. We saw a new offense, the new offensive coordinator. What stood out to you from whether you were out there watching practice or the spring game itself?
Well, just defensively, like just to see them line up, have communication, and not be a panic mode situation where someone goes in motion, you're trying to point 7 different places, and then when the ball snapped, you've got someone running free down the field. Like we all know the communication was a big part of the failures of the defense from a year ago. So it was nice to see everyone know their responsibilities, be in the right spot, and it looked like, okay, when someone goes in motion, when they have a shift, it's easy. We know our responsibility. We're going to translate whatever the call is on all 3 levels. And like it sounds so basic, but last year we saw when you don't do those basic things, what can happen. So we know they have the talent. Like when you look out there, they got the top 2 cover corners returning, right? And so giving up all those passing yards last year doesn't tell me it was a talent issue. It was a scheme issue. Mm-hmm. So you have guys coming back. Todd Harris has started since 2018 here. Mm-hmm. Like that's as veteran as you're going to find. And so it was good to see the players that I know can play be in the right spots defensively. So that was the key thing on that side of the ball. On the offensive side of the ball, the thing that I love to see was a lot of the empty stuff that we saw in 2019. Mm-hmm. As we'll all remember, we saw Clyde Edwards-Helaire in empty a ton. 5-man protections, led the country in 5-man protections. Yep. And when you're out there, you can't just be out there to be window dressing. Like you have to have a purpose. Like if you're just out there to run a hitch or a go route, I'm really not going to respect you. And this is just going to be something that you're doing to see what the coverage is.
Yep.
But when you actually have a purpose with it, like when you ask your running backs, hey, we want you to be a part of this 2 or 3 man route combination, right? We want you to be able to play in the slot if we have to. We saw that. We saw empty. We saw running backs motion into the slot and actually run route concepts that weren't just your hitches and your goes, because that was a big part of the success that 2019 had.
Yep.
So, obviously Jake coming from Joe Brady and the Carolina Panthers, you could see that was a point of emphasis in the spring game and throughout the 15 practices.
Yep. And I think you'll see in that a lot of versatility that we didn't see in the spring game because it's going to be vanilla. But maybe in the fall you'll see those empty sets. Maybe you'll see, like we saw a taste of in the spring game, a Coy Moore or a receiver actually as a threat in the run game, which Jamar Chase did a little bit at the end of the season.
Jets did a little bit of it as well, as far as lining up in the backfield.
Yep.
And that's a great point that you make, and you bring Coy Moore up because we did see that at the end of the spring game. He has, running ability. He can run the football if you ask him to, and that's great because you don't fall into tendencies.
Yep.
Like the last thing you want to do is, okay, I'm going to put a receiver back in the backfield. Well, he's going to have a free release. He's probably going to run a flat. Maybe he runs a wheel route or something to try to throw you off. But if you can actually integrate him in the run game, and even if you integrate him in the pass protection, say, okay, this time we're going to go 6-man protection. And you're not going to have a lot on your plate, but if the corner, the safety, or the backside linebacker comes, hey, you've got him in protection. And if you have a receiver that you feel comfortable, now I know it's a little bit of a wild card, but hey, just get the guy off our quarterback, then that gives you so many different things because you don't fall into that tendency. And the defense coordinator can't say, look, every time Two's in the backfield, he's running a flat or he's running a wheel route. No, give other responsibilities and do other stuff, and then that becomes a real package that can be dangerous.
For sure. The more field the defense has to defend, the harder it is for them to defend. So that was schematically, I think, the thing that stood out to me as well. Offensively, I want to talk a little bit of personnel before we get to the draft and guys that stood out to you on the field. I'll throw my couple names out there, and then you give me a couple, and I'll probably steal some from you, so I apologize. The first name that comes to mind is Dwight McLaughlin, who was absolutely fantastic all over the field in the spring game. Came on late last season by necessity, had to play when Stingley was out, stepped up, got beat here and there, but got thrown into the fire and certainly didn't jump right off the coals. He was in there in the thick of things, making plays last year, learning. But, wow, he took his game to a different level in the spring game, was all over the field. Heard that he had had a good spring. Wasn't expecting to see that.
Right.
There's another guy in the secondary that I want to talk about, but I'm gonna leave him for you because I think you might touch on him too. That's in that same mold. Offensively, there's going to be so much talk about the quarterbacks. I almost don't even care to talk about it because you're going to be good at quarterback no matter what.
Right.
I think we saw who the top 2 guys are. That I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. And whether it's Max or Miles, game 1, whether it's a combination of both of them, I'm just not worried. You got good quarterbacks everywhere. Your 3rd and 4th quarterback are really good too, and have a chance to be really, really good football players. So I think fans love the quarterback conversation. I don't really care about it that much because I think you're going to
because it's in good standing.
Because it's great.
It's not a position battle out of necessity. It's one because you have really talented players who 3 of the quarterbacks have started SEC games, multiple SEC
Won
games,
SEC games,
right? And nobody else has that.
Yep.
And so you have that you can feel comfortable about. And then, like you mentioned, like Garrett being a highly touted freshman, so you feel so good about it that the conversation's more of which one's going to win the job and not really breaking down all the weaknesses of the quarterback.
And plus, like talking about it now, I don't like position battle talk in spring because everything changes. Everything can change. An injury could happen. A transfer could happen. A guy could emerge out of nowhere. It's just I don't like getting into that. So I like to focus more on the guys that emerged. And then I want to throw one name out there that's related to what you were just talking about. And he didn't play in the spring game. I don't know if he participated in spring at all because of an injury. But he's a guy that I've had a couple conversations about and a guy that I would love to see get involved in this offense. And it's Trey Bradford.
Yeah.
And the reason it's Trey Bradford is because of what you were just talking about, the ability to go empty. That's a guy that has a receiver skill set, not dissimilar to what Clyde could do in his ability to run routes, catch the ball. I know he had a couple drops against Florida. Not to make excuses, it was pretty foggy.
He had a big catch as well.
Had a huge catch. But they've seen that in his game going back all the way to last year. And then when I sat down with Kevin Falk before the Super Bowl, we were kind of talking off mic, and he was like, keep an eye on Trey Bradford. I mean, he talked about the other guys too, and one of the things he talked about was Ty Davis Price, and at that time he was saying Ty wants to get bigger and bigger. We're telling him slim up a little bit. I thought he actually looked slim and
Yeah, he did.
and trim and explosive in the spring game, so that was great. But we know what Ty is. He's not really they did use him in the passing game, but he's not a receiver. He is a between the tackles, run you over. John Emery has some of that, the more shift to him, but he's still more a traditional running back, not really a guy that we've seen involved in the passing game a ton. Maybe he grows there, but Trey Bradford has that to him, and I think there's a very specific role in this offense that he could fill.
So if you go back, like what we just talked about, tendencies, if you don't fall into tendencies with all the running backs, they all have a different skill set that can help you win. Now, you got to ask them to do more, step outside their comfort zone to be able to break those tendencies, but I've said it for a long time. LSU's had so much success with running backs by committee. You won national championships in 03, 7, played for 1, 11 with running backs by committee.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Clyde was an outliner in 2019 because he played, what was the breakdown? We had like 93% of the snaps.
It was the highest
crazy.
percentage of snaps at any running. I think it was maybe the second highest. I can't remember who the highest was.
The highest in Power 5, second college in FCS or FBS, sorry. But when you look at what they could do, right, well, you have guys, and you just mentioned what their skill sets are, and that's great because Bradford can be like the Trendon Holiday of 07, right? He has that feel to him where if you put Trendon in the backfield, you could run stretch. You could run zone. Obviously, he could handle that. And obviously, your jet sweeps and all the motions and the gadgets, like to have that as a part of your game. Every time 8 was in the game, I remember the defense just pointing to him, calling out his name, watch what he's doing. So even if you're not getting the ball, you're affecting the play. So I feel like Bradford has that skill set. We've seen it in practice. We've seen it limited action, though, in the game. So going back to like having Coy not falling into those tendencies, well, Bradford, if he can be a true receiver, then you have a running back in the game at all times as well.
There was some diversity in the run game, too. The first running play from scrimmage was, give me the football terminology here, both guards pulled. Like it was both pulling guards and they ran to the left. I don't know what that's.
Counter.
Is it
you
counter?
Could counter. You could, it could be.
Could you call it
buck sweep?
Okay.
Yeah. Depends on which way, if you're going to the strength or if you're going to the weak side.
Yeah, that's for you to talk about. I don't know all that stuff. But last year, and really with Clyde too, it was the running game was not very diverse. It was zone left, zone right,
Yeah.
like inside, outside. That's it. So there was a little bit more diversity there, and I think they'll continue to develop that, and that's fun to see how they fit the different.
That's a great point you made because they didn't have a lot of that. Like, I'm trying to think, in 2019, it was really zone and ISO.
Yeah,
like that was your 2 run plays, and it was keep it simple. And when you go back and you watch what you even saw in the spring game, like both guards pulling for the buck, like that's a big play compared to what they've been doing, right? And to be able to switch it up like that will be good for them because I do think these running back strengths, especially TDP, like that's probably going to be something in his wheelhouse to be able to read. If you have 2 pullers, if you run traditional counter where you've got, a tight end or an H-back, I know those are dinosaurs, but if you have one of those pulling up with a guard, and that's what he's probably used to reading. So it's always good to have it in your repertoire, not only – like Clyde was unique. Clyde was very unique in the fact that you could have those 2 run plays and you could have that much success with them.
Okay, so I gave you my names. Any names that come to mind for you?
I think the defensive name, Jay Ward, was going to be the name I was going to say, and – Jay's not able to make that move if Dwight doesn't play like he did at the end of last year and in spring ball as well. Like, you can't make the move because Jay Ward's got to play corner, right? He's going to be our 3rd corner. We can't do this. We can't move him to free safety, a position we absolutely need some depth at if Dwight doesn't play like he did. So that was a 2-part deal. And then they both are thriving right now in their positions. Like, I had a coach tell me that he thinks Jay Ward could be all SEC at free safety. If they have that kind of belief in him. So that part of it, a position you absolutely had to have some depth.
I'll interrupt you.
Some young guys too.
I'm gonna interrupt you real quick before you go to the next name, to dive in on Jay Ward. Last year before the season, I was out there watching practice, and I was talking with a few of the kind of support staff, and they had some data. I think I've talked about this before, but it was how each position had improved or declined athletically, testing wise. And one of the jumps was, I think, at like 2nd string corner or whatever, maybe a 2nd string nickel. There was a massive jump. I was like, what's the deal there? And they go, Jay Ward is the deal there. They're like, Jay Ward is the most improved player in our defense, or has grown the most over the last couple of months from our defense, and we think he's gonna be a star this year. And then what happened? He got hurt. He got hurt maybe like a week later or something. And so he came into the season hurt, wasn't supposed to play against Mississippi State, had to play because Stingley had an issue right before the game and couldn't play in that game. And so Jay Ward played hurt for first half of the season, maybe even longer than that. finally started to recover, and then at the end of the season, we saw his playmaking ability. So excited to see him at safety because he's got that stuff you can't teach there.
Yeah, I'm all with you. And those two moves have been great for the defense because, again, they need some depth. Young guys coming to help out, but you never know how long that's going to take for them to transition from high school to the college ranks. And so offensively, I think a guy like John Trey Kirkland,
Yes,
not just because of his spring game numbers, 16 catches or whatever his final tally was, but you need a steady Eddie receiver to go along with all the very talented young guys on that roster. Now, they've got guys that can run every route in the route tree, but John Trey is this guy, and he's almost got the same career like Jacoby's had. Jacoby Stevens, right? You keep moving him places, you keep moving him and try because you know like he can help your team, but
Did he play corner in the Fiesta Bowl?
I'm pretty sure he did.
I think he did when we had no corners left, and it was Terrence Alexander and
Manny Netherly.
And I think John Trey played corner in that game, if I remember correctly.
I mean, they moved him, a couple of different places, and he's Wildcat quarterback has been something they, messed with at practice. So, Jacoby was in the same way. Jacoby played like all three levels of the defense. He played H-back, he played receiver, but once he found his home, he was a star. Like I feel like John Trey can be a guy that really just steadies things, and he can come in, he can be your third receiver, and he can be whatever you need him to be, right? And it's good to have that because Kayshon Boutte is an all-world player. Like, we know that. And there's some other freshmen and sophomore receivers that we could talk about that are going to have more catches and yards than John Trey. But John Trey is the guy that can actually just, like, even things out. And it feels like all the quarterbacks have a trust in him that if things are a little hairy, they're not exactly right, they know he's going to be where he's supposed to be. And that can go a long way.
Yep. He looked really good. I think one of the position battles that I'm going to really keep an eye on once fall camp gets around is what happens behind Kayshon Boutte at receiver. And you'll have some young guys coming in. You have some guys. Deion Smith was on the field a little bit, but had been hurt all spring and didn't really look like he was out there to do more than anything, just to put pads on and kind of get a sweat in. Understandably so when you've been out for a while. But him, you got Chris Hilton coming in, Brian Thomas coming in. You still have Dre Jenkins. You have Trey Palmer, who was a little banged up, didn't dress in the spring game. So
I'd love to see Trey.
Your eyes just lit up.
I'd love to see Trey get fully healthy because I've covered Trey for a long time. High school at Kentwood, all the way out, obviously to LSU. When he touches the ball and when he's got space, he's electric. He's game changer electric.
Saw that with the kick return last year.
And he's got a kick and a punt return already in his LSU career. Like, get him the ball in space and just let it happen organically because he's going to make something happen. Now, you got to be on the field for that to happen, but I'd love to see him take a giant leap and be a guy that you're like, hey, if we're going to run screen game, if we're going to run tunnel screen, now passes, bubbles, all that, Trey Palmer's the guy that gets that.
Yeah, he's that next in line of like the player that we all look at, like, man, if it can just come together for him and get him out there. LSU's had guys like that over their careers that eventually it clicked for. Hopefully it'll click for him this year. Okay, let's hard pivot to NFL draft. It's right around the corner. I am a infamous idiot when it comes to the draft. Not with the LSU guys. I know all about the LSU guys. I sat down with all of them, did the car wash with them.
You talked with them more than anybody.
Talked to all of them, had great conversations with them. I'm sure everyone listening has listened to those because they were wonderful, insightful conversations, and those guys were really great to sit down with us and make time for us. So I'm well-versed in them, their skill sets. It's the same issue that I have like once we get into football season. My focus is so lasered in on LSU that I don't pay attention to Florida, for example. I couldn't tell you who Florida's number 2 receiver was last year going into the game. And it's the same.
Trayvon Grimes.
Okay, there you go. That's like information that's going to go in one ear out the other, and I'll never remember.
That's just because Doring like nails it repeatedly.
When I hear like Hunt on the radio, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I remember in 2003 when we're playing Ole Miss and so Michael Clayton caught that out route on," and I'm like, "Where does this memory come from?" Because like it's all lost to me. So that's not my forte, but I do know these guys. I know their skill sets. I know their personalities, but I don't know where they're going. So I could go guy by guy. I feel like I'd rather frame it in terms of which guy blank, which guy is going to have the longest career, shortest career. No, we won't talk shortest career. We're here to pump sunshine only.
We are not doing that. Not happening.
No sunshine, only sunshine pumping here. But I think I want to frame it that way. So let's start with which guy do you think has the most immediate impact when he steps on the field next year for an NFL football team?
This is actually tougher than people think.
I was going to think it was an obvious answer. But
Jamar is the obvious answer because I do think, like, Jamar from day one, even at LSU, like, he was a guy like, we got to find a way to get him on the field. And remember his freshman year, like it was kind of the red area. That's when he got in there, because as you're a freshman, your head's swimming the plays and the coverages and all that stuff. But they're like, doesn't matter. Like, we got to get him on the field. Just
throw it to the pylon and let him go get it.
Exactly.
Which actually is where he caught most of them, like one step inside of the end zone.
You're exactly right. So I think he makes an impact no matter what team he goes on. I think he is going to be a star from day one. But Jabril Cox might be the second name for me, because if he goes into the right spot, and if you're listening, Mickey Loomis, if he goes to the Saints, I really feel like that's a great spot for him, because next to what they currently have at linebacker, Demario Davis, I think he'd fit perfect. Remember, we saw former Tiger Quan Alexander before he got hurt.
Yep.
He was traded to the Saints, and he was thriving in that role. They need someone that can, cover the back out of the backfield.
Oh, he can do that.
Cover the tight end.
He can do that.
Do all those things. He's really like a hybrid nickel linebacker where he can do some DB type things. So I think if he goes to the right situation, I do think New Orleans is one of those situations. From day one, he'll also be a starter in the NFL, because as we know, like if you play on third downs, you're basically a starter now with the way NFL and their offenses kind of work.
Yeah, I remember sitting down with Jabril and asking him, like, I feel like I just read an article, I think, from Pro Football Focus, and it talked about the disappearance of either the Mike or the Will, one of the not the Mike, either the Will or the Sam. I guess the Sam.
Sam.
The Sam, right?
The Sam is turned into a nickel Sam.
Yeah,
that's basically what it is.
And that's what he is. He's the modern linebacker. You saw it late in the season, his ability to cover, and I don't know. I feel like I couldn't agree with you more that there's a spot for him somewhere. What did he run at his pro day? Did you see?
He was low 4.5s.
Yeah, I mean,
so
he can
you're
move.
there. You're there.
Move.
I mean, at his size to run that, that's a perfect time. And it's this. Look, this isn't like the old Sam linebacker, and not to get too X's and nosy, but the old Sam linebacker when you played under defense, well, he was going to be tilted at the line of scrimmage on your tight end, expecting it to be a run his side. Okay, well, that's completely changed. Like now, if you play Sam and you're a linebacker, it is that nickel Sam that we're talking about, where you're going to be asked to cover. If you go, George Kittle and Travis Kelce and just all the tight ends that are just racking up yards in the NFL. So it's completely changed, and he is the perfect prototype. And I can actually see Jacoby doing some of that as well.
Okay, so that's a perfect transition, because I was going to ask you where Jacoby fits in at the next level, because we're talking about this versatile linebacker and the modern player. And talking with Jacoby before his pro day, he was like, I'm going to put up freaky numbers tomorrow. And, like, he had that same – had a slim down.
Probably said it, like, in the nicest way, because he's such a nice kid, like, with a smile.
Yeah, I mean, just being authentically Jacoby. Yeah. And he looked slim down, and I was like, what are you going to run? He said, I'm going to run a 4.4, and he just missed the 4.4.
Yeah.
But he said my vertical is going to be 40+. And I was like, 40+?
Yeah.
And then I talking to a couple other guys, they're like, Jacoby has hops. Like, he can get up. He's a freak. And I think some of that got lost in the shuffle as he moved around from position to position, as he put on weight, as he lost weight, as he tried to adjust to whatever role he was playing. I think I did. I can't speak for everyone. I lost sight of that physical freak that he is. And so I'm curious from your perspective where he fits in at the next level. Is he a Jabril type player that's a nickel safety? I don't think he bulks up to become a linebacker now because he's slimmed down so much. So where do you think he fits the next?
Well, I think it matters what team. And the NFL is all about the fit and timing and which team falls in love with you, because every team's got a different version of you than the next team. They just do. Like I know for me in my personal story, like 10 teams wanted me to play running back and the other 22 wanted me to play fullback, and it just depends on which one was going to draft me, which kind of way that my career was going to go. So I kind of feel the same. I feel like Jacoby's, if he goes to a Seattle-like team, well, they're going to ask you to blitz the quarterback and be in the box and stop the run and do all those type of things. And if you go somewhere else, like we're talking about New Orleans, maybe you are that nickel Sam linebacker where you don't have to bulk up to get to 240, but, you gain a little bit of weight, and that's the position you play. And you might go to a team that says, no, we just want you to play a normal, strong safety, right? You're going to play deep in this defense. We're going to have you in coverage like any normal, strong safety would be. So he's a versatile guy. It all depends on which team drafts him as far as which path his NFL career will take, because I can see him fitting on all three of those different type of teams. Like, we see Jamal Adams for Seattle. Like he had double-digit sacks last year from the safety position because they asked their safeties to do something different than, the Chargers asked their safeties to do.
Okay, which guy, to go back to the original framing of the question, do you think ends up having either the longest career or maybe like if you were taking the over-under on each of these guys' years and you said, all right, Jamar's over-under is, I'm just going to throw a number out there, 10.5, okay? And Von Rosenberg's over-under is 6.5 because he's older, whatever. However you wanted to present those. Either it's kind of a question that you can answer how you want to. Who either has the longest career or overshoots that projected over-under by the most?
All right, so this one's always difficult because, you have your elite athletes and sometimes they wear down a little bit quicker. But it's hard for me not to go with one of the receivers as far as longest career.
Okay.
Like Jamar and Terrace, both of those guys, I do think have many plays still left in their legs. I know Terrace has had some injuries, and one of them obviously was in high school at the end of his, or actually beginning of his senior year.
Yep.
But I think if Terrace can stay healthy, he's a guy that can play for a long time because he can do so many different things. He's shown you can play inside and outside. And just for Jamar, it's just the pure athlete that he is. I mean, he's a freak. I mean, he's going to test through the roof. He's going to impress you with everything he does. The guy's able to lay on his back and pop up in full pads. I mean, all the things that we've seen him do so many times.
Can I sink in there for a second with Jamar? So the comparison that I keep hearing is Anquan Bolden, but more explosive and athletic. And Anquan Bolden lasted for a long time.
I feel like if Bolden and Steve Smith combined with each other, that's who Jamar Chase would be. And both those guys played
for a long time.
Forever.
And so it goes to say that, like, if Jamar loses a step at some point, which is going to happen eventually, like maybe when he's like 48 because he's a freak, but whenever he loses that step, well, he's still got the muscle and the polish, and you just feel like there's going to be a home for him for a long time.
And that's the key part, like the receivers we're talking about. Like, they were able to be strong receivers in their routes. Like, if they ran a slant, there was no way in the world that this corner was going to get inside of them because they're going to use their body. They're going to create that space. And it's really, we did a deep dive into Jamar going to the Bengals earlier today on OTB because, yes, you need offensive line help, but Jamar is also protection because he is able to get open on those routes when you're trying to throw hot off someone blitzing off the edge and all those type of things. I've never really seen a receiver be able to do it as well as he's done it.
Yep.
So that is a guy, he doesn't play offensive line, but he helps your protection.
Yeah, it's like what happened in 2019, right? You brought back the same O-line from 2018, and now that's not to take away credit from those guys who won the Joe Moore Award as the best line in the country, but their job was made easier because you had a quarterback that was sharp and intuitive, and you had receivers that got open really quick. And I mean, it's a team effort. It made everyone better. So I think he could have that effect. Well, like, I'm not a mock draft guy. Jamar going to the Bengals is obviously appealing to me and a lot of LSU fans just for the narrative.
Right.
I'm sure it's appealing to Joe because he knows what Jamar can do. But again, Joe probably would love to have that knee protected by a good offensive line. So what are the mocks saying? What do you think the odds are? Is it 50-50? Is it more likely than not he ends up in Cincinnati? Like, what are the chances that we get to kind of milk this story?
Yeah, I think a lot of people really like Jamar at 5 to Cincy because of all the things we just talked about. They did sign an offensive tackle in free agency. They have another offensive tackle in Jonah Williams. It's a first-round pick, and so they're expecting him to take a jump this year. And they feel like they can get offensive line help later. Almost that Jamar's too much of a talent to be able to not select at 5. I know Ben Baby, who covers the Bengals for ESPN, he has them selecting Jamar Chase. And so, a guy like that who's tied into the organization, he's heard that. So there's a real possibility that we could see Jamar and Joe linked back up, which I think we all would be excited about.
You got Joe, Jamar, Thad. They're halfway there.
Yeah.
They find Terrace later in a later round. I don't know that they're going to be able to get their hands on Clyde or Justin at this point, but you never know. All right, so which guy – we talked about top-round talent there with Jamar. Which guy do you think maybe is in the later rounds but gives you late-round value? Maybe he falls to 4 or 5 or 6.
I think a guy that has the potential to fall because teams haven't seen him, but he's got first-round skills is Tyler Sheldon.
Okay.
When Tyler's on, he is dominant.
Yep.
And Tyler Sheldon was a guy that was in the first-round conversation before he opted out, and I think it was out of sight, out of mind, and people wondered, was he going to be back in shape? And I thought he looked good at the pro day. Like, that's what he needs to be.
He was moving well.
And this might not mean something if you're listening outside of Louisiana, but when you're the number 1 player in Louisiana in high school, that means a whole lot to me because if you're number 1 in this state, you're a dog.
Who are some of the guys that have been number 1 in the past that are, like, dudes at the next level now. Putting on the spot here.
Leonard Fournette.
He's pretty good.
That he worked out pretty well. I think Odell was Odell the number one player in Louisiana?
I don't know. If he wasn't, he certainly has worked out very well.
I'm pretty sure that he was the number one
Ruben
player.
Randall
Was the number one player.
Back in the day he came through.
Yeah, I'm trying to think like in my classes. Glenn Dorsey. Yeah, what am I saying? This guy's pretty good.
That guy. Not a bad football player.
Pretty good football player.
Yeah, so the pedigree is there. If you're the best player in the state coming out of high school.
I mean, if we looked it up, we'd go down a list and we would just name them. You're like, oh, I got NFL.
Yep.
That's just, so that means a lot to me. So I know the talent's there, and Coach O was able to get the most out of him in 2019. He's got to go to the right system. He's got to stay motivated and all those things, which I think he can, because he's got first-round skill, but I think he's probably going to fall. Like, now that I'm looking at it right now, I think his grade is like 116th overall. So you're probably talking about fourth round, maybe third round.
Sure.
And he's got first-round talent. So that guy could, overplay his draft stock.
Two guys I was thinking of that could also fall in that conversation for two different reasons. One is a very similar reason, out of sight, out of mind, is Carrie Vincent Jr. And again, I have no idea where he's being mocked. So if I'm off base, correct me. But there's a lot of things that are valuable in the NFL right now. Speed has got to be at the top of the list. And his ability, I think we saw it especially late in that national championship run. It was kind of a joke because early in the season, up in the press box, we're obviously cheering for LSU, but trying to keep it under our breath
right.
and be subtle. And early in the season, teams went after Carrie. Like the Texas game, they went after Carrie. And so we'd kind of be like, come on, Carrie, make a play, that kind of thing, where you're,
right.
Kind of that fan perspective on things. And then late in the season, you look at Carrie Vincent Jr.'s numbers over that last 3 or 4 games, best in the country by a mile in terms of guys playing in the slot. I mean, it wasn't even close. He was on a different level over the last really 5-6 games of the year. Even, I may be wrong about this, I remember his numbers from the Alabama game when certainly Alabama put up a bunch of yards and scored some touchdowns. Remember his numbers in that game being pretty good.
Yeah.
Who would he have been going up against in that game? Was he going up against Waddle? Would he have been seeing?
He would have been,
because Devontae was on Stingley.
Yeah, he probably actually would have been. I mean, Judy was in the slot a lot.
Yeah, Judy. So I mean,
it was either Judy, Ruggs, Waddle,
a dude. And after I finish talking, I'm gonna look up the numbers on my phone here while you're expanding on Carrie a little bit, and I'll confirm my suspicions, or maybe just prove my suspicions wrong. But I do know this: over the last 4 or 5 games of that season, he was exceptional. Yeah. And because he didn't play this year, maybe teams are like, all right, well, he didn't play this year. That didn't affect Jamar Chase at all, but maybe for a guy like a Carrie Vincent who's not as big or wasn't an outside lockdown corner, he was more of a safety nickel type of player. Maybe he's not top round value, but maybe he's a guy that you get later in the draft and fits right in and can give you some things.
So going back to the question you asked earlier about who's going to play the longest, well, you don't think of Carrie right off the top of your head, but because of the way the NFL is going, to your point, being able to play the nickel, that is a skill set. It's not playing corner. It's not playing safety. It's playing in the slot and be able to be athletic enough to be able to shut down the really talented players that you're going to come against in the slot, because football changed. About 3 years ago, teams started to take their best receiver and put them in the slot because they felt like they had a mismatch. They felt like there's something that I can do that you can't cover because you're going to have your third best corner on me, and we're going to have the advantage there. Well, teams got smart on defense about that, and they started to change some guys up, and Carrie is a guy that has the skill set to thrive at that position. You're right about 2019. There was times earlier it's like, okay, I know there's more in there. I want to see more, and he showed that. And the interception he made on the trick play in Atlanta, I don't know if there's anybody else in the country that could have gained the ground that he did to be able to make that play. Like, you can't coach that. And there might be people that ran faster 40s than Carrie Vincent, but having the same speed in full pads and having the same speed in the underwear Olympics, that's completely different. He's got the same speed in full pads.
He's got football speed for sure.
That's something that he's going to be able from day one, be able to show teams, and they're going to fall in love with it. In the nickel position, it's like a niche. Like, if you can do it really well, you can have a decade-long career because teams are looking for the guy that can thrive at that position.
I'm still pulling up the slot stats, so I'll get back to those in a second. But another guy that I thought of when we started talking about late-round value was Racey McMath. And I remember, I've told this story a couple of times, so I'm sorry for those who have heard it before, but after Jamar won the Biletnikoff in 2019. They had me playing like substitute SID because we had so many guys at awards. They were like, we just need people with these guys to like help keep them organized. And so like, Cody, you go with Jamar and you take care of him. So after he won the award, they have a dinner for all the award winners. You go to different places. And so I was sitting there with Jamar and his family and Mickey Joseph. Right. And Mickey was talking about the next year in the future, at some point in the conversation. He said, I'm telling you, man, I hear from guys at the next level all the time because obviously Mickey Joseph knows a lot of NFL guys based on his family and his relationships. And he said they love Racey McMath. Racey could come out of school this year and be a 4th or 5th round pick. And that was when he was behind Justin and Jamar and Terrace, still making plays when he got in there. But just because of his size, his physicality, what he did on special teams, they loved what he could bring to the table. This year, he made some plays. He battled some injuries. But we've always seen that with Racey, the physicality, the blocking downfield, making big plays in the passing game when he's targeted. And then he goes out at Pro Day and runs 4.33, 4.34. I don't remember what it was.
Fast. I'd have to get in a car to run that fast. So
but I remember he was doing his shuttle too, and I was standing there kind of in the background. But I would be where they would run after the shuttle. Like after you finish that little shuttle, you like sprint through the cone. Yeah. And he like ran right by me. He looked at me. He goes, "Was that fast?" And I was like, "Yeah, it was pretty fast." And he wasn't being like cocky. He was like he was like genuinely asked, like, I mean, I don't know shuttle times, but that was pretty fast. But he's got that ability of he's going to step in right away and play special teams, and he might be able to help you in the passing game.
And I think he has more receiver ability than he's able to show you. But look, there's nothing wrong with that because you had 3 first-round picks. You were behind at the receiver position. But think of guys like James Wright and Russell Shepard. They were able to parlay a long NFL career because they could play receiver, but they were, just special teams war daddies, as we call them. And he's got that plus some. I mean, you're talking about a very talented guy. The size and speed combination you don't see very often. So, again, like, this is a guy that I can see the right situation. He'll be your special teams captain for 10 years and play receiver. So it's a very unique class in that. By the way, while we were talking, I did look up the top player in Louisiana going back to 2014. So 2014, Leonard Fournette, we mentioned him. Tyron Johnson in 2015 in the NFL with the Chargers. The next year, Christian Fulton, pretty good. Tyler Sheldon in 2017, as we mentioned, top player in Louisiana. Devontae Smith was number 2. He just won the Heisman Trophy. So
pretty decent player.
Good company to be with. 2018, Terrace Marshall, a guy we've talked about. 2019, Derek Stingley. 2020, Kayshon Boutte. So to our point about Tyler Sheldon, like, you're the number 1 player in Louisiana. All those guys that we just mentioned, they're NFL players, and they're thriving in the NFL. So a lot of talent. Hopefully, team is able to draft him and get the most out of that talent. I think they will.
To catch up on the stat that I was talking about earlier with Carrie Vincent, I think this is the right week. It doesn't say the game; it's just the week. But against Alabama, Week 9, I think of according to Pro Football Focus, of 2019 season, 29 snaps in coverage, 1 reception allowed, 1 yard, 2 yards after catch. Highest graded nickel in the country that week. And if I remember correctly, the Alabama game, I think it was Patrick Queen's interception, and did he get a cheap shot at some point? Kerry got cheap shotted by an offensive lineman, I think. But then bounced back to play in the second half, if I remember correctly. Now, I remember Flott playing some in that game too, so maybe Kerry was kind of in and out. But that was when Kerry was kind of playing some safety for you too, and Flott was stepping in the net. So he can do a lot for you. All right, let's touch on some guys that we haven't talked about so far. The first name that comes to mind for me, since I'm sitting across from you, is Tory Carter. And I talked with Tory in the interview about what his role will look like, and I was like, you need to talk to Hester. Like, you need to just reach out and talk to Hester, because the hat, of course, said "Make fullbacks great again," which made me think of you as maybe that was your merch or something that you're selling on the side that I don't know about. You got a side hustle maybe, but I don't know. Tory is one of those guys, and I told him this, that I think could be. I can't remember how I phrased it to him. It's hard to phrase it. Not better in the NFL than he was in college.
More utilized,
but yes, have a more defined role there, because the fullback is still used in the NFL, and LSU basically went away from it. And Tory was a team player and did special teams and played H-back, tight end, whatever. Wherever they needed him, he went there. But at his core, he's a fullback, and LSU hadn't used a fullback for a few years. So now you get to the NFL, you need a situational fullback. You need a guy that's just basically, hey, I need you to go out there and hit that guy harder than he's going to hit you. Tory Carter's a pretty good guy to do that.
When he signed with LSU, he was the #1 fullback in the country, and he just saw Connor Neighbors and J.D. Moore and all these guys have a lot of success at that position. But look, after a year here, the offense completely changes. And so the position that he signed with LSU to play, well, it went away. It just did not exist. And you're exactly right. He showed that he could play in line. And what I mean by that is he could be in the line of scrimmage, blocking defensive ends, outside linebackers. So it forced him to do things that probably were outside of his comfort zone, because I know they were outside of mine. Like, that's not something I did at LSU. And then once you get and you're playing in the NFL, you're playing against a 3-4 defense, and that outside linebacker is Terrell Suggs or James Harrison. You're like, wait a minute, timeout. I got to block that guy. It's like, yeah, you got to block that guy. But it's not going to be a shock to Tory, because Tory's already been doing that over the last 2 years. And like you mentioned, we know he's going to be a special teams guy. But teams in San Francisco comes to mind, Pittsburgh comes to mind. The Saints still use a fullback. They carry one on their roster. They'll get into I formation. They'll get into 21 personnel, 22 personnel. And so there's a bigger role probably and a bigger chance for him to play in the NFL at his natural position. So he's going to go to the right team. I hope that he gets drafted by the right team. But even if he doesn't get drafted by the right team and he has to pick which team he goes to, he'll have that choice to be able to go to the offense that needs a fullback, because once he gets there, as you know, like, competition's not something he's scared of. So he just got to get in the right landing spot, a team that really utilizes the fullback and able to show his skill set.
All right, I'll end. I guess this will probably be my last question. I can frame it in a way that we talk about the last two guys that I want to talk about a little more in depth. What's more likely? And again, Mr. hasn't read a mock draft all year, so I have no idea where these guys are landed. What's more likely? Terrace Marshall goes in the first round, or Zach Von Rosenberg gets picked, period? And that's not to belittle Zach at all. It's just punters don't get drafted that often. But do you think it's more likely that Terrace finds his way into the first round, or Zach gets picked up somewhere in there? Because he's got some value as an older punter that you can kind of
he does. Zach, he definitely has some value there. So this isn't against him, because I do think he has an opportunity to be drafted, because they know exactly what they're getting with an older guy who's going to do everything the right way and all this type. And obviously he's talented, but Terrace is going to be a first-round pick. I can't imagine a team passing up on a 6'3" receiver that runs a 4.3, that when he was on a team with 2 other first-round receivers, he still didn't get buried. Like, he still shined. Like, we all noticed that, leading the country in touchdown receptions before he gets hurt. Then he comes back. And I think if we asked Joe Burrow in 2019 in the red zone, who did you trust the most? I think if he's being honest, he would say Terrace Marshall. And I think it showed in the game tape.
Stats speak to that.
Yeah, this is someone that is a first-round talent. He was the #1 player in Louisiana. Kind of going back to our conversation before, I think he has shown that he can stay healthy for a full season now that he just played this 2020 season. So I think he's a first-round pick. If he slots past Baltimore at 27, I'd be surprised. But if he does, New Orleans, if you're listening, 28, go ahead and select my guy. I know there's some defensive issues, but I'd love to see Terrace playing for the hometown team as well.
I tweeted this on October 10th, so it's not fully updated. But all Terrace Marshall does is catch touchdowns. 15 red zone targets since 2019, 13 red zone catches, 12 red zone touchdowns. So he was absolutely a machine, and there's a great story there too. I think it's 40 years today, or maybe yesterday, that Joe Delaney got drafted by the Chiefs.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, Joe Delaney is Terrace Marshall's uncle. Passed away after his rookie year or his second year in the NFL, really young,
very young in his career,
in a drowning incident, trying to save some kids' lives, I think, in a lake.
In Shreveport, I believe. Yeah.
And so Terrace has this. He never met his uncle, but has this connection to his uncle that has been written about plenty. If you want to Google it to research it, but great story, great kid, and so I'd love to see him sneak in that first round, because I think he absolutely deserves it. So we covered everybody, right? I think I did pretty decent for a guy that doesn't know anything about the NFL draft.
I'm just really excited. We got the fullback in there. That was we were
fullback
getting towards the end. I was kind of questioning if it was going to happen.
You got to trust me, man. You got to trust me. I'm looking out for the fullbacks. I love the fullbacks. Big Tory Carter fan. Probably the best fullback that's been on the podcast recently in LSU history. Like, if I'm looking at the fullbacks that have been on, because you were a running back.
Okay, thank you.
You weren't a fullback.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, that was fun. Let's do it again. let's get back together this season more frequently to talk LSU football because it's going to be a fun season. It was nice to talk a little spring ball. Nice to talk a little draft. Thanks for carrying it. What do you want to plug? You got anything you want to plug? Plug your radio show?
Yeah, just listen to OTB every single morning, 7 to 10 a.m. It's from the top and the bottom of the state of Louisiana, from Shreveport all the way down to New Orleans, and on CST now. 3 hours. They picked up the third hour.
There you go. Can I plug something else too?
Go ahead.
Coming
You've
up
got
soon.
Like 97 things you do.
Coming up soon on Tigers Win, Jacob Hester and T-Bob Hebert. I'm trying to decide whether to put out the Jacob Hester, T-Bob Hebert episode or the Kim Mulkey episode first. It's like, big timers on both hands. Which way do I lean? I don't know.
If you add T-Bob and I's national championships together, we only come one short of what Kim has. So
she's got a bunch. She's got some hardware on the shelves.
Yeah, she's got one as coach.
She's got 6.
Player
she's
and
played
assistant.
an 8 and she's got 6.
So
she's
if you add hers up just from the job she previously was at 3, we only come one short.
Now you're getting there. But it was that episode in particular was a conversation between a couple of Hall of Famers.
You are
PBS Hall of Fame
Baptist
and
Hall of Fame. I'm not knee Hall of Fame.
I know.
Christian.
I saw that discussion on OTB, by the way. Whatever I can do as an esteemed member of a Hall of Fame myself to help you get.
What does Hall of Fame?
What a joke that we're the two of us talking here. That I'm the one that got in a freaking Hall of Fame because I wrote a hype video script.
It was really good, though, and it continues to be good. And what you really don't know is I need this Hall of Famer to host OTB with me next week. So I'm trying to butter you up.
Butter me up. Okay, I'll come in. I'll come help you out.
Yeah.
I'm not the one you need to butter up. You need to butter up my wife. She's the one that.
That's true.
She likes you, though. She's a big fan of yours.
Okay, well, good. Well,
she can name maybe 3 football players in LSU history, and you're one of them because she was at the Florida game.
I'll send her a video saying please.
All right. Thank you. While we're on manners and you're asking my wife, please, thank you for joining me today. Help us out. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time on Hey Fightin Podcast.